بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن محمدا رسول الله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Today my topic is going to be involving a certain thing that's very important to our society today, human rights. We hear about it a lot. We see it we hear it being talked about on social media, on the news. I see it a lot, and we all have generally the same stance that how society is today and how certain rights should be given to certain people. But how does Islam protect the rights of certain? Religion, as I said prior, religion is seen today as a cause of modern problems, not the solution. People think that religion is the reason why certain people don't get certain rights that they deserve. Religion is the reason why it justifies certain actions that are very wrong, but that is not true. I'm giving this khutbah because we need to teach people that Islam was a religion that helped in guaranteeing certain human rights, certain rights that people have. And in this khutbah, I'll be talking about how Islam treats certain topics in today's society. I'll be doing two in particular. I'll be doing racism and sexism. So, as I said, my first part of the khutbah will be talking about racism and Islam, and my second part of the khutbah will talk about sexism and Islam. As someone who's researched As someone who has researched both of these topics deeply, I know the Islamic viewpoint and it influences me into who I am today. Now that I've stated what this khutbah will be about, I'll move on to my first point, which is Islam and racism. Now before I talk about Islam, let me talk about racism as a whole. It's always been a part of history. From the founding of America to also all throughout history, the Crusades, you name it, there's been so many examples of racism in today's society. And unfortunately, racism has been backed by certain evidences. And what I mean by that is that certain religious groups or certain scientific beliefs try to credibilize racism. For example, certain poems used to write about how certain children that were not white were considered half child, half devil, and how certain scientific beliefs believe that certain races weren't fully developed. And so you have superior races which are fully developed, and you have inferior races which are not developed. And these ideas have plagued society and has caused a lot of harm towards people. But who was the first person to dislike racism? Who was the first person to take a stand against racism and racial beliefs? The beliefs that we are not different based on the color of our skin. Up until the 1960s, we all know that racism was the status quo of society. And even today, we still struggle with racism. We see it a lot. Many notable figures in history were racist or racially biased. A lot of people that we celebrate in history today, like Christopher Columbus, for example, was a known racist. Many examples, I don't need to name any of them, but we all know they were very racially biased or racist. But who was the first notable figure in history to be against racism? According to many historical scholars, they all believe that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was the first major figure to be anti-racist fully. He openly preached against racism, and in many examples. For example, giving a black man the honor to give the adhan. And as we all know the story, many Sahaba, they were initially against it because they were all we're Arab and he's a slave, why should he give it and we cannot? But we later discovered that, the Prophet know that no matter the color of your skin, no matter where you're from, a Muslim is a Muslim, and everyone deserves equal opportunities. In his final sermon, he said that an Arab is not better than an Arab, but an Arab is not better than a non-Arab, and a non-Arab is not better than an Arab. And a white man is not better than a black man, and a black man is not better than a white man, except in piety. So this statement alone shows his clear stance on racism and racial bias. Not only that, but it also shows the Islamic viewpoint on racism and racial bias. That it is a plague to society, and that we should never give into it, and we should try to rid of it as much as we could. Muslims were way ahead of people in this time. as well. Now, racism was just one example of how Islam guaranteed human rights. What about the others? In my second part, I'll be talking about sexism. And but before I get into how Islam treats sexism and women's rights and equality, we all know that there's a notion today in today's culture that Islam is a religion that does not believe in women's rights, does not believe in equality based on genders. They believe that, we give men more rights than women. And I've seen this, and it comes in two parts. The first part comes with, the Islamophobes. One of their major icons is a woman wearing a niqab or something like that. It's like one of their biggest strikes on Islam. Like, it shows that women are oppressed in our religion and stuff. And they believe that this is an oppressive action towards women, trying to take away things from their actual reasoning. But also there are some cultural Muslims who do not necessarily guarantee the rights of women. Like, for example, we all know forced marriages and whatnot, and treating women as inferior. It comes in both parts. But what is the Islamic statement on women's rights? Well, let's start off with one of the first examples, an action that happened during the Jahiliyyah period, burying baby girls alive, when families were so disappointed by the fact that they had a baby girl instead of a baby boy, so they would bury that girl alive and kill her right there. Islam banned that action. Prophet Muhammad clearly condemned that action, said that it is wrong for us to do. And this shows that in Islam, women have the same they also deserve the right to live just as a man should. Another example was how Islam dictated the right, dictated the fact that women have the right and the choice in who they want to marry. And obviously in today's culture this is normal, but back then it was groundbreaking. My third point comes from a hadith. Bahz bin Hakim reported on the authority of his father, from his grandfather, Muawiyah ibn Haida, saying, he asked the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, how should we approach our wives and how should we leave them? And in this hadith, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, do not revile her face, do not beat her, which means do not hit your women. And this shows a clear topic on a stance that is unfortunately very prevalent in a lot of societies, which is domestic violence. And Islam as we know from this hadith, Islam is clearly against it. Now, I've said a bunch of these things of what Islam, for example, guaranteeing the rights of women, choosing who they want to marry, and Islam being against domestic violence. But what is so important about it? It's basically what's saying the status quo of society today. But we have to look at the fact that Islam was a religion that was, that came down 1400 years ago. It's a very old religion. It came a very long time ago. And back then society was very corrupt and very there was a lot of bad things about it. And even in recent history, if we look back just 200 years ago, women did not have the choice on who they want to marry. And we see this a lot about how girls who are as young as 14, 13 are being married to men that are twice their age. This happened a lot throughout history. But Islam took the notion and said, this is wrong. Women should have the choice to marry who they want. Similarly, in a lot of ancient cultures, it was even in American culture, it was okay for men to beat their wives and their children like that. Islam said that this is wrong and domestic violence is wrong. And it was clearly ahead of its time, and it clearly showed us, told society what was wrong before society acknowledged it was wrong. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله ولكم فاستغفروه إن الله غفور رحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So, to summarize my entire khutbah, many people believe that religion goes against equality and justice, but as I've spoken with my points, that is not true. And the reason why this khutbah is important for you guys all is because in a time where religion is considered the problem of society, not the solutions of society's problems, it's important that we teach people the truth about our religions and not let them believe in the falsehoods about our religion, specifically when it comes to human rights issues and whatnot. So, in this khutbah, I talked about the Islamic viewpoint on certain human rights, specifically the Islamic viewpoint on sexism and racism. To reiterate, I first talked about the Islamic viewpoints on racism, and then I've also talked about the Islamic viewpoint on sexism. And inshallah, you guys take heed into what I say and spread my message, and spread this message about how Islam truly is to people who are have a misconception about it. Ya Allah, please preserve the rights of Muslims all across the world. Ya Allah, please help those who are oppressed due to wrong cultures and wrong mindsets. Ya Allah, there are people being oppressed by their governments, by their their people, their leaders. They are being concentrated. They are being mass killed. They're being driven out of their homes and their societies. Ya Allah, please help them. And Ya Allah, please help those that are suffering from the virus. There's a lot of people who are in danger and they need. They're very afraid. So Ya Allah, please help us all from and keep us safe. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا الصلاة.